New Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with parapsychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. This is part 2 of our 2-part series comparing remote viewing with clairvoyant reading. My guest, Debra Lynne Katz, is an expert in both of these disciplines. These parapsychological disciplines. She is the director of the International School of Clairvoyance and author of 3 books, including You Are Psychic, Extraordinary Psychic, and Freeing the Genie Within. She is also the 2-time winner of the Warcollier Award given by the International Remote Viewing Association for an outstanding research proposal. So she is a remote viewer, a psychic reader, and a researcher. Welcome again, Debra.
Thank you. Great to be back.
It's a pleasure to be with you and to be able to converse across these different domains with you. You know, at the end of our previous interview, you were describing how sometimes when you're doing remote viewing, such as trying to find a missing person, you would employ one of the techniques you learned as a clairvoyant reader in order to sort of separate yourself from the problem involved. And I can see that that is really important because, well, after all, there can be so much pain and suffering in the world. As a psychic, if you open yourself up to it, it would be overwhelming.
Yes, definitely. And that's why a lot of people don't last too long in these fields, whether as a clairvoyant reader or a remote viewer. And a lot of times they don't really understand what's happening to them. They just know that suddenly they just don't want to do the work anymore, or every time they go to do it, they fall asleep or get tired or a headache. Others are aware that it's just too emotionally draining. And that wouldn't be the case if they were really if they knew the techniques to help separate. And there's some preparation techniques and then things you can do afterwards. And just recognizing when you're still caught up in it, that's a big part, because people can be caught up in what they were looking at for days or weeks sometimes and not realize it. They just don't feel right, not realizing that a part of themselves is still dialed in.
You know, in my early academic career, I got a master's degree in criminology, and then I made a decision to switch from studying the negative side of human deviance to looking at the positive side of human deviance, mainly parapsychological functioning. But part of that was I didn't like all the negativity associated with studying psychopathology and crime. And yet I know in the psychic realm there are people who specialize in that.
Yes. In fact, you may not know this, but I was a former federal probation officer for 3 years. And at the same time I was basically learning how to be a probation officer on the job. I had just gotten my master's degree in social work with an emphasis in criminology, but I was just thrown into this federal job, and it was very, very stressful. And that was around the time I started to do meditation classes and explore my psychic abilities. But I got to the point too where I just said, I don't really want to be in this negativity and also in this controlling position. So as a probation officer, you're making all these decisions about people's lives, and while in some ways some people have to protect society, I was just like, I don't need to be coming at it from this way.
You had a higher calling, obviously.
Right.
Or a different calling.
And I didn't know what that was, and it was I basically one day just said I can't do this anymore and left my job, and you know, with no money or anything, but I just knew that I needed to make a change somehow. And I still, while I do occasionally missing person cases, that's not something I want to be doing all the time. That's why sometimes I do a lot of where I'm working in research projects as a subject, or I'm using remote viewing for purposes of helping people make wagers, making future predictions for wagering and financial gain too. And a lot of that just involves describing photographs. And there's not too much emotional about a photograph. It's just something fun, and so I really like to do that a lot.
Well, we ought to mention you're very actively involved in the Applied Precognition Project You, in fact, if I recall, you are the webmaster for their website.
Yes.
And you specialize, therefore, in the technique known as associative remote viewing, which is a very unique technique used in remote viewing. I don't think there's anything comparable that psychic readers would do, is there?
Well, psychic readers, if they wanted to use their abilities to make money or to gamble, they may say, let's say for the horse races, they may just tune in and see if they can get the name or a symbol for the name of the winning horse, or they might tune into the color of the jockey, what clothes the jockey's wearing. So that's how they would do it. But that only goes so far. You can't do that over and over again because you start to know the horse names, and maybe you're not good at hearing names. So really, back to the Stanford Research Institute, Russell Targ, Stefan Schwartz, who was working with Russell Targ a couple decades ago, they came up with the concept of associative remote viewing. And basically the idea is that you, for whatever event you have, there's different outcomes. So say for horse racing, there's going to be a winner, and there's going to be different horses. So instead of looking directly at the horses, you associate a picture with each horse. And then what the viewers, the psychics, but they're not calling them psychics, they're calling them remote viewers, what they have to do is describe the photo that has been associated with the particular horse. So it might be a photo of a mountain top and a photo of a person swimming in the ocean. And so then...
And the reason they don't try to see the horse directly is to avoid the intellect again.
Right, because there's only so much, that maybe the viewer gets a picture of a horse, or maybe they might get a color or something. But if they want to do this over and over, that works fine a couple times. But if you're doing this on a weekly basis, people are going to get too familiar, and there's only so much they could look at. But if they can focus on a photo that's associated with the horse, there's hundreds, thousands of different photos.
And we should say that association is totally arbitrary. It's determined by a researcher using a random process. But the point is that after the horse race, you're going to get feedback about that particular picture, and so you're really trying to focus on what are they going to give me feedback on in the future. It's a precognitive phenomenon.
Yes, there's 2 points in time. There's the point where the viewer tunes into the photo they're going to see in the future, and what determines which photo is the outcome. So if horse A is the winner, then they're going to be seeing the photo that's attached to horse A, so they can describe the photo. And meanwhile, the researchers take their session and they say, oh, it sounds like they're describing a mountain over here, so it must be, and if that's what they're going to be shown in the future, that must mean what they're talking about right now. And that allows them to go and make a prediction and wager on it.
Based on the association that was arbitrarily made but is going to hold true. So
right, and that process is called associative remote viewing.
I know it's very complex, and people get confused over and over again when you try and describe it to them.
It is. It's very confusing. Even for those of us who've been doing it for years, we'll get confused ourselves.
Yeah, but it's been shown to work and has been used in investing in the futures market and in the stock market and in wagering in Las Vegas on various athletic events and so on.
And with the group that I'm working with that really involves over 100 different viewers, the Applied Precognition Project, right now some of the projects are at a 78% success rate, meaning that 78% of what they have called has come true. They call it a hit rate.
Well above chance.
Yes, way above chance.
Typically you expect about a 50% hit rate by chance alone.
Right. And that, and people have been working very diligently to get that hit rate up. And with any parapsychology research, as you know, the challenge is when you have strong results is to keep those results going over time. And a lot of times there's a decline effect. Whether the viewers get tired, or maybe they're exposed to too many photos, or there's so many variables that still aren't understood. So there's a lot to still work out in that area.
And you also employ in the Applied Precognition Project the multiple vote principle, where if you combine the results of many people, as you say, up to 100 in some instances, then you actually mathematically can improve the overall score better than single individuals would do.
Well, that's an interesting question. It really hasn't been determined if having more viewers helps. Now, I think in some cases it does, but in one instance, I know of a case where a group of viewers, say 8 to 10 viewers, there's one viewer who consistently does a fantastic job viewing the wrong photo, and his sessions have been so stunning for the wrong photo that's not the photo that's going to be attached to the...
That's known as displacement amongst parapsychologists.
Yes, and that's a problem in associative remote viewing and all of parapsychology research. And it really has, it's something that has to be looked at closely, but because a lot of times if results aren't so good, there's the inclination to say, oh, well, no psychic functioning was happening. But really what's going on is it was misplaced. The viewer does a good job describing the wrong thing. And so in this one case that I'm helping a researcher deal with, he's asking the question, well, we had this one viewer and he consistently described the wrong photo, and what that does is it skews the results. And so, yeah, how to work that out. And one of the things that our group, the Applied Precognition Project, is working on is looking for viewers who are not only good at describing any photo, but describing the right one, and those who have less chance of displacement. So sometimes it's almost, I think, better just to have one viewer or just a couple that are experienced. That's the other thing, is that while anyone can do this, I think across the board in many parapsychology studies, they're finding that the more experienced viewers do tend to do better than brand new people over time.
It's a paradox, because I do know, mathematically speaking, if you could say that a particular viewer, let's say 10 viewers are all accurate at the 55% level, if you use a multiple vote amongst those 10 viewers, you can mathematically ascertain that the multiple vote or the majority vote of those viewers will be accurate at a better level than 55%, maybe 70%. But now, let me get back to the problem of displacement that you brought up. How about when you're doing a psychic reading on somebody? Displacement seems to be a big problem in parapsychology research. Does it show up in psychic readings?
Definitely. One of the things I learned early on is that it is very easy to tune into a person's desires and their fantasies as opposed to what the truth is. And I learned that when a woman was asking about a future relationship and who she was going to meet in the future, and I started to describe this person that, I mean, he was like the most, fantastic person you could ever imagine. I was like, gosh, I want to meet this guy. Where can I find him? But something wasn't matching up, because this woman had a lot of issues, and something wasn't matching up with the picture of him versus her. In fact, I think he was like 20 years younger than her. And suddenly I realized, wait a second, this is her fantasy. She was so happy with what I was telling her, but I had to stop and say, okay, what's the truth? And the truth of the matter was, when I re-looked at it, I didn't see anyone coming in until she worked on all her issues. And she did not want to hear about that. So that was part of what sent my attention over into her fantasy, because she really wasn't psychologically open to exploring the things she needed to shift.
Do you ever displace to a completely different person in a psychic reading?
Well, that has happened when I first started to do readings professionally. I lived in Sedona, Arizona, and I worked out of a bookstore, and occasionally people would come in with their friends or their spouses, and that person, if that person was sitting next to them or in the back of the room, I would sometimes tune into them. If they, sometimes it's what's the strongest signal. So if the person has a louder personality, or they're really wanting to know something, or they're kind of pushy, then my attention would go to them. So now I have a rule that I won't let anyone else in the room, which is a good practice, because you never know what's going to come up, and a lot of times that person needs to know about that person, that you know, they just couldn't set boundaries with the person and say, don't come in here with me. So you really have to set boundaries for yourself, and understand where you can go wrong and where you tend to go wrong, and there's always room for error. There's no psychic practice where there's not going to be times where you're off, where you have error, where misinterpreting things, having your own stuff come in, as you know, whether it's clairvoyant reading or remote viewer, projecting things into the scene. That's all about training and practice and getting better at that. But it's, you know, no one's perfect at it. So
it's as if there's a signal to noise issue, whether you're doing psychic readings or remote viewing, and what you're saying is that that's where training is especially useful, is helping people to distinguish.
Yes, and with reading people, it's almost more challenging, because that noise is not just coming from the psychic or the healer, it's coming from the person you're reading. So if I was reading you and you're very anxious, or you're not believing that I can do this, or you want me to see some things but not other things, I'm going to be hitting all of that in addition to the information that I want to get. I'm going to be feeling it. I might feel your anxiety, your confusion. I'm going to be more confused, as opposed to someone I'm reading that's just, you know, totally open. They're in a great space. They're really wanting to hear everything. That's going to make a difference. So it does get really challenging. Anytime you deal with people, you know, as a psychologist, you know, it's sometimes just easier to just read a book than talk to a person, you know.
Well, I have to say, I enjoy interviewing people much more than doing psychotherapy with them. So let's talk a little more now about on the other side, on remote viewing. When you're given a target, it's often you're just given a number. This is target number 765321, for example. But that target, for all you know, could be very emotionally laden, even though you don't know anything about it.
And really, when that is very possible, and at least if that's going to be the case, a lot of project managers, especially responsible ones, will at least let you know there could be something here that could be disturbing. Now again, that serves as front loading, but for the manager, if it's not a scientific project, you know, they may make the decision, and it's really the responsible thing to do, to let the viewers know there could be something here. Now for more experienced viewers, or who, if they already know, they tend to work on those kinds of cases, they don't have to tell them. But the other thing is that it really, for a viewer or psychic, it takes, you have to be brave, and you also have to have the attitude that I can deal with anything, and you know, even if I hit an emotion or I feel afraid, you have to be able to step back and say, okay, I'm afraid, you know, whatever is going on, I understand it's part of this, and I can deal with it. There's a lot of people that are, you know, it's the difference between someone falls down and hurts themselves and then they're going to whine about it for an hour, versus someone that keeps going. So there's a lot of personality factors that enter into both these practices that make it so that people can be successful but also continue in this. And if somebody's, you know, so sensitive that, you know, they get upset because they had a remote viewing target that was upsetting, you know, it's the emotion in reaction to the emotion or the experience, and people need to be able to get over it. You know, in the same way, if I was reading you and you were really angry or you gave me a hard time, that might bother me, but okay, so what? I'm going to get over it. Other people, you know, maybe just shattered. So personality characteristics of who's doing this makes a difference. One of the big characteristics that I've found is confidence level. My students that have the hardest time developing their abilities or doing sessions are the people that in life are the least confident. And I could pretty much tell, just, someone who is just can just jump into things and they have no problem communicating with other people, they're going to do terrific.
Yeah.
But if I have someone who's very timid and they're not comfortable with dealing with other people, at least in the realm of clairvoyant reading, they're going to have a much harder time. It's almost like you can only see what you can deal with and what you can communicate. So if there's something too psychologically intense, even people that have a strong confidence level, if it's too psychologically intense, we have protective factors. You could call them our psychological defense mechanisms that really work right for us and keep us from being able to see what's going to be disturbing. There's a built-in protective factor which is really helpful, but some people have that too much, and so if there's anything that's remotely disturbing for them, or say there's a personal issue, like I had a student where he really needed to, he was a bill collector, a collections officer, and he really needed to get out of that field. It wasn't right for him. So whenever he had to read someone and it was about their career, he would freeze up and he wouldn't see anything, and he'd be sitting there like, I can't get anything. And it was because if he saw it in them, that they needed to make changes.
You'd have to deal with his issue.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you can't deal with your own issues, you're going to be blocked, and you'll just feel like, oh, I'm not getting anything. And it's kind of the same thing with remote viewing. If viewers are tasked with something so disturbing, many of them will just totally skip over it, and that's where displacement can happen too. They'll go on to the target they're going to be assigned the next day, or they'll just go off to some place and you have no idea why they went there, but it protected them, and that's really a good thing.
Let's talk about the social stigma surrounding both psychic readers and remote viewers. I think it's fair to say that there's a significant portion of the population, probably a significant minority in both cases, who think that this is all BS.
Yes, absolutely, and there's not a whole lot we could do about that except to educate them. And some will respect it if they see that it's being done in a scientific manner, but even there, as you know, there's a large portion of people that just see this as BS. But you know what I'm starting to realize? That it's not even so much those that mindset that's the issue, but the mindset of people who are coming from religious backgrounds where they're taught so many false things about these subject matters. And it's really pretty insane, because what are you doing when you pray to God, or when you think about Jesus, or you ask Jesus for help? You're involved with the spirit. You're doing telepathy, mind-to-mind communication. You're asking for intervention, which you could think of as psychokinesis.
Within a strictly prescribed realm that is given to you by your religious institution.
Exactly. So they're doing the same things, but it's within a different context. It's with they're called different things. There's restrictions, and in these religions, there's so much fear around these topics. And I understand why that is, but how many people attend church on Sundays? Millions. Even single churches, you sometimes get 10,000 people on a single Sunday. How many people were at the last Parapsychology Association conference?
A few hundred.
A few hundred at the most. So, and this is where the critical thinking is done, and where if people go to these conferences and if they read the literature, they're going to see how many thoughtful people are doing very careful research. And so much of it, I know the word ignorance isn't a very nice word, but that's what it is. And I tell my students when they get upset when people say, like, oh, why are you wasting your time and your money on this? They get upset with those people, and I say, well, those people, they just need to be educated. You're getting educated, and they just don't know that they're not educated. That's the thing. It's like they just think that they don't realize that if they just put some more study into it. How many times have people said to you, well, there's no proof of any of this stuff?
And of course, they're ignorant, but they've been educated to believe that it's either the work of the devil or that there isn't, quote, a shred of evidence, even though there's 150 years worth of accumulated evidence.
Right. There's thousands of studies where there's statistical significance, if not way higher, but have they read those studies?
Very few people read the studies. So those people are particularly ignorant, but they've been taught that. There are teachers who tell them and who repeat it, and I can say in the universities, that's the mainstream view in academia. I know because I have a doctoral degree in parapsychology. I got it over 30 years ago at the University of California at Berkeley, and no one in the world has subsequently received a doctoral diploma in parapsychology. It's a taboo topic.
Yeah, and it's so sad because I know a lot of people that would love to get degrees in that, and they ask, where can I study? And there's really only a couple places in the whole world where you can't even get a PhD in parapsychology, but there's a couple places where you could study with other professors.
Yes.
But not a whole lot. And
there needs to be much more, and I think, Debra Lynne Katz, the work that you're doing is going, in the conversations that we're having like this one, hopefully will help to create that world someday where there'll be many more opportunities for people to explore these subjects.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think that people that are interested in these subjects, the psychics, the remote viewers, they really need help to learn how to conduct their work and their projects in a more scientific manner. So there is more people that, I think it's so important to have people that are doing this work also doing the research, because as Jessica Utz has said in one of her papers. Yes, Jessica's now the president of the statistics.
American Statistical Association.
Yeah, and one thing that she said years ago when she assessed the programs, the military programs and the programs at SRI, was that there's so much evidence that we really need to move beyond proving that psychic abilities are real and instead go into looking at how can we understand them and improve them. She made those statements well over a decade ago, and really we're at when you have to keep proving the same thing over and over again, what it does is it does keep you from looking at those minute details, understanding why in a group of 10 people will one viewer consistently describe the wrong photo, or why is it easier to do one thing over another. We need to understand all of this, and also the way that subjects or studies are crafted. If you're doing a study to prove psychic functioning as opposed to understanding it, your methodology is going to be different. But it almost seems like every study we do, there's still that element like, oh, you have to prove it in addition to the...
It's the age in which we live, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a sad comment, but Debra Lynne Katz, I'm so happy to have had these 2.5 hours with you. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being with us.